The desperate signal, the twin moons of Zeleth, cast their gentle blue light across the floating cities, where millions of beings lived in perfect harmony with their world's unique gravity wells. Ambassador Kira stood at the observation platform of the High Council chamber, her translucent wings catching the moonlight as she watched her people go about their evening routines. The Zelethi had evolved as a species of diplomats and artists, their bodies adapted for flight in low gravity, their minds shaped by millennia of peaceful coexistence. Everything changed when the deep space sensors detected the approaching armada. The readings were unlike anything in their historical records. 300 vessels, each one bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Kira's secondary hearts began racing as she recognized the configuration. The Skoran Dominion had found them. The Skoran were known throughout this sector of the galaxy as the ultimate predators. They didn't conquer worlds for resources or territory. They conquered because they could, because it fed their insatiable hunger for dominance. Worlds that resisted were burned to glass. Worlds that surrendered became slave colonies. Their populations worked to death in the Skoran war machine. Council leader Joran materialized beside Kira, his aged form flickering with the bioluminescence that indicated extreme stress among their kind. The evacuation protocols have been initiated, but we both know the truth. Our ships are designed for exploration and trade, not war. We have perhaps 10 vessels capable of any defense, and their weapons are ceremonial at best. The first Skoran transmission came through exactly as their fleet crossed into Zelethi space. The face that appeared on every screen across their world was a nightmare made flesh. Commander Thrak of the Skoran Dominion stood 3 meters tall, his body covered in natural armor plating that had evolved on a world of constant warfare. His 4 arms each held a different weapon, a display of power that needed no translation. Inhabitants of Zeleth, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. You have been selected for incorporation into the Skoran Dominion. Surrender immediately, and 1/3 of your population will be permitted to live as servants. Resist, and we will take what we want from your ashes. You have 1 rotation of your planet to decide. The High Council convened in emergency session. Some advocated for surrender, hoping to save at least some of their people. Others spoke of fleeing, though they knew their ships couldn't outrun Skoran interceptors. It was the youngest member of the council, a scientist named Vera, who proposed the unthinkable. We send a distress signal, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not to our allies, who are too far away, but to everyone. Every frequency, every language we know. Someone might answer. Joran's wings drooped with despair. Who would risk their lives for strangers? Who would stand against the Skoran for a world they've never seen? But they had no other choice. The signal went out, a desperate cry across. The cosmos containing their coordinates, the threat they faced, and a simple plea for help. It traveled at the speed of light through the vast emptiness, reaching civilizations they had never contacted, species they had only heard of in legend. The message found its way to 3 human vessels conducting a deep space mining operation near the Orion Nebula. Captain David Shun of the freighter Iron Resolve was the first to receive it. He was a veteran of the Mars colony wars, his face weathered by decades of life in space. His crew was a mix of miners, engineers, and former soldiers who had chosen the freedom of the void over life on Earth's crowded surface. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal, announced Communications Officer Maria Santos. It's not in any human language, but the computer's translation matrix is working on it. When the translation came through, Sean felt something stir in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had during the colony wars when he'd heard about civilians trapped by advancing forces. The Zelethi's message was clear in its desperation. They were facing extinction. 2 other human ships were within communication range. The Prometheus, a research vessel, commanded by Captain James Wright, and the Vengeance's Dawn, a decommissioned military cruiser, now serving as a private security vessel under Captain Lisa Park. Chun opened a channel to both ships. Wright appeared. On screen first, his younger face showing the curiosity that had driven him to the stars. "You received the signal too? My xenobiologist is saying these Zelethi are completely non-violent. They don't even have a word for weapon in their language." Park's scarred face joined the conversation. She had lost an eye during the Jupiter uprising, and her remaining one burned with intensity. The Scoran Dominion. I've heard whispers about them from traders near the frontier. They're bad news, real bad. They've never been stopped because no one's been crazy enough to try. Chun studied the star charts. It's a 3-day jump at maximum burn. We'd arrive just as their deadline expires. With 3 ships against 300? Wright asked. That's not brave. That's suicide. Park leaned forward. Since when has that stopped humans from doing the right thing? These Zelethi are calling for help. They're going to die if we don't do something. The debate continued. For precious minutes. They weren't military vessels. The Iron Resolve was armed, but only with mining lasers and asteroid deflection systems. The Prometheus had scientific equipment that could be weaponized, but was never designed for combat. Only the Vengeance's Dawn had real weapons, and even those were outdated by military standards. Chun thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the kind of universe he wanted her to grow up in. One where the strong preyed on the weak without consequence, or one where anyone, would stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. "I'm going," he announced. "The Iron Resolve will answer their call. Anyone who wants to join. Me is welcome." Wright was quiet for a moment, before nodding. "The Prometheus is with you. Maybe we can't win, but we can try." Park actually smiled. The Vengeance's Dawn was named for a reason. Let's remind the universe why humanity earned the title Deathworlders. The 3 ships altered course and engaged their hyperdrives. Behind them, the message they sent to Earth and all human colonies was simple. Peaceful species under attack. Coordinates attached. Send everyone. 3 days later, as Zeleth's sun began to set on what might be their last day of freedom, 3 small ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were dwarfed by the Scoran armada, like minnows swimming toward sharks. But they came anyway. Commander Thrak observed the arrival with amusement. His tactical officer, a younger Scoran named Gret, reported the specifications of the approaching vessels. 3 ships, Commander. They appear to be from a species called humans. Our database has limited information, but they're from a Class 12 death world. Thrak's 4 eyes widened slightly. Class 12 was nearly unheard of. Worlds that hostile didn't usually produce spacefaring species. They killed everything on them long before evolution could create intelligence. But 3 ships were still just 3 ships. Open a channel to these humans. Thrak ordered. Captain Chun appeared on the screen, flanked by his fellow captains. Behind them, their crews stood ready at their stations. Thrak noticed something unusual. The humans weren't showing fear. Their biological readings indicated elevated adrenaline, increased heart rates, dilated pupils, but these weren't signs of terror. They were signs of anticipation. "I am Commander Thrak of the Scoran Dominion. You will identify yourselves and explain your presence in this system." Chun stepped forward. "I'm Captain David Chun of Earth. These are Captains Wright and Park. We're here to answer the Zelethi distress call." Thrak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 3 ships? You came to challenge 300 with 3 ships? "We came because they asked for help," Chun replied simply. "That's what humans do." The simplicity of the statement seemed to confuse Thrak. "You risk your lives for strangers? For beings you've never met? This makes no logical sense." Park spoke up. You wouldn't understand. You see the universe in terms of predator and prey. We see it differently. Then you will die for your delusion, Thrak declared. I offer you one chance to leave the system alive. Go now and tell your species that the Skoran Chun cut him off. We're not going anywhere. You want the Zealothy? You go through us. First, the transmission ended. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Shun turned to his crew. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to pick a fight with impossible odds against an enemy that's never been beaten. Anyone who wants to leave can take the escape pods now. No judgment. Not a single person moved? Santos smiled grimly. Captain, we're receiving signals. Dozens of them. Other human ships are coming. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, private yachts. The message we sent. People are responding. Shun felt pride swell in his chest. How long until they arrive? First wave in 6 hours. But Captain, most of them aren't armed. Doesn't matter. They're coming anyway. That's what makes us human. He turned to the view screen where the Skoran fleet waited. Let's buy them some time. All ships, attack pattern Omega. Show these bastards why Earth is classified as a death world. When Deathworlders fight, the first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space like a deadly constellation. The Iron Resolve's mining lasers, designed to cut through asteroids, carved into the lead Skoran destroyer with surprising effectiveness. The Prometheus released a cloud of modified sensor probes that confused enemy targeting systems, while the Vengeance's Dawn lived up to its name. Its outdated but still functional weapons, finding weak points in Skoran armor. Commander Thrak watched the battle unfold with growing unease. These 3 small ships fought with a ferocity he had never encountered. They didn't follow standard combat protocols. When surrounded, instead of retreating, they accelerated toward his ships. When outgunned, they used their vessels as battering rams. When their shields failed, they kept fighting anyway. On Zealoth's surface, Ambassador Kira watched the battle through the High Council sensors. The Zealothy had never witnessed violence on this scale, and yet there was something almost beautiful about the way the humans moved. They fought not with the cold precision of machines or the savage fury of beasts, but with something in between. Purpose, determination, hope. Captain Wright's voice crackled over the emergency channel. Chun, I've got an idea. Our geological survey equipment can be reconfigured to create gravitational fluctuations. It won't destroy their ships, but it might destabilize their formation. Do it, Chun replied while wrestling with the controls. The Iron Resolve had taken heavy damage, but his engineering crew was performing miracles, keeping her flying. Park, can you cover him? Already on it, Park responded. The Vengeance's Dawn unleashed everything it had, drawing fire from a dozen Skoran vessels, while the Prometheus worked its scientific magic. The gravitational waves rippled through space, causing the tightly packed Skoran formation to scatter. Ships collided with each other, their perfect military precision disrupted by humanity's chaotic ingenuity. But the victory was short-lived. The Skoran fleet was simply too large, too powerful. Hull breach on Deck 7, Santos reported. We're venting atmosphere. Chun gritted his teeth. They had lasted longer than he expected, but physics was physics. 3 ships couldn't defeat 300, no matter how determined they were. But then Santos's eyes widened. Captain, hyperspace signatures. Lots of them. Space around Zealoth suddenly erupted with arriving ships. Not military vessels, but civilian craft of every description. Cargo freighters, passenger liners, mining vessels, research ships, private yachts, and even a colony transport. They came from Earth, from Mars, from the asteroid belt, from colonies Chun had never even heard of. Hundreds of human ships, most. Without weapons, all answering the call. The communication channels exploded with voices. "This is the cargo ship Lucky Fortune. We don't have weapons, but we've got a hold full of mining explosives." Another voice joined in. "Passenger liner Stellar Dreams here. We're evacuating civilians from Zeleth. Anyone tries to stop us will have to go through our hull." And another. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the agricultural ship Green Harvest. We're farmers, not fighters, but we're not leaving these people to die." Thrak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans kept coming. Ships that had no business in a combat zone threw themselves between his fleet and the planet. When one was destroyed, two more took its place. They fought with mining equipment, with cargo containers filled with explosives, with their ships, themselves as weapons. But it was what happened next that truly shook the Skoron commander. A small personal yacht, barely large enough for a crew of 5, positioned itself directly in front of Thrak's flagship. The pilot, a young woman barely out of her teens, appeared on his screen. "My name is Sarah Kim," she said, her voice steady. "Despite her youth, I'm nobody special. Just a college student on vacation. But these people asked for help, and I'm here. You want to kill them? You kill me first." Thrak ordered his weapons to target the yacht, but hesitated. In all his conquests, he had never encountered this. Species that fought when cornered, yes. Military forces that defended their worlds, certainly. But ordinary civilians traveling across the galaxy to die for strangers? It defied everything. The Skoron understood about survival. Captain Shun, his ship barely holding together, broadcast on all frequencies. "Commander Thrak, you're witnessing something you don't understand. Humans don't fight because we're strong. We fight because it's right. Every one of these ships came here knowing they might die. They came anyway, because that's what we do when someone needs help." The battlefield had become chaos. Human ships rammed Skoran vessels, their crews singing ancient Earth battle songs as they died. Others formed protective shields around Zelethi. Evacuation ships, absorbing weapons fire meant for the defenseless. The scientific vessel Prometheus had reconfigured its equipment into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator, disabling dozens of Skoran ships before being destroyed. Parks. Voice came through the static. "Sean, I'm reading massive energy buildup in the Skoran flagship. They're preparing to fire their planet killer." Sean's damaged ship could barely maneuver, but he didn't hesitate. "All human vessels converge on the flagship. Whatever it takes, protect the planet." What followed was something the galaxy would remember for millennia. Over 200 human ships, most without weapons or shields, threw themselves at the Skoran flagship. It came from every angle, some accelerating to ramming speed, others detonating their reactors, all with the single purpose of stopping the planet killer from firing. Sarah Kim's yacht was the first to reach the flagship. Her final transmission was simple: for Zeleth, for humanity, for what's right. The explosion as her reactor went critical damaged the flagship's targeting array. The cargo ship Lucky Fortune followed, its hold full of mining explosives, creating a blast that knocked out the flagship's shields. Ship after ship impacted or exploded against the Skoran vessel, each one buying precious seconds for the planet below. Commander Thrak watched his mighty flagship being slowly torn apart by beings who should have fled in terror. His tactical officer reported casualty figures that seemed impossible. "Commander, we've destroyed over 100 human vessels, but they keep coming. Our planet killer is offline. Hull integrity failing." For the first time in his life, Thrak felt something he had never experienced. Fear, not of death, but of something else. These humans didn't fight like predators or prey. They fought like something else entirely. Something the Skoran had no word for. "Commander," Gret reported, voice shaking. More signatures incoming. Earth's actual military fleet. 3 battleships, 15 cruisers, and Commander, the dreadnought Humanity's Wrath. Threk knew that name. The Humanity's Wrath was legendary, a ship that had never lost a battle. But it wasn't the military might that broke his spirit. It was the hundreds of civilian ships still fighting, still dying, still coming. The humans hadn't waited for their military. They had come themselves, ordinary people in ordinary ships, and they had stopped the unstoppable Scoron Dominion. All ships, Threk commanded, his voice heavy with something that might have been respect. Withdraw. This world is protected. Gret stared at him. Commander, we've never retreated before. We've never fought humans before, Threk replied. They're not prey. They're not predators. They're something else, something we're not prepared for. As the Scoran fleet began to withdraw, Captain Chun's failing ship drifted near Zeleth. His crew was battered, his ship dying, but they had done it. They had answered the call. The Earth military fleet arrived to find the battle already won, not by soldiers, but by ordinary humans who had refused to let strangers die alone. Ambassador Kira's transmission reached every human ship. We don't have words in our language for what you've done. You came to save us, knowing you would likely die. Why? Chun, blood running down his face from a head wound, smiled. Because you asked for help. Because it was right. Because that's what humans do. We're from a death world, ambassador. Everything on our planet tried to kill us as we evolved. But instead of making us cruel, it taught us something else. It taught us that sometimes the only thing standing between someone and death is the choice to stand up and say, not today. We chose to stand. The Zelethi would never forget what they witnessed that day. Songs would be sung of the humans who answered their call, the Deathworlders who had learned that the greatest strength wasn't in conquest but in compassion. The Scoran Dominion would spread word throughout the galaxy of the species that should never be underestimated, the ones who turned their Deathworld origins into a willingness to die for others. And somewhere in the void, as rescue ships collected, survivors and towed damaged vessels to safety, a new legend was born. The legend of humanity, the Deathworlders who answered when the universe called for help. Asterisk.